The sound that woke me wasn't a knock. It was my car screaming as it was stolen legally. At 12:07 a.m., metal kissed metal outside my house, not gently. A tow hook bit down. My car alarm wailed once like it knew it was dying, then went silent. Red brake lights glowed at the curb, two angry eyes. And before I could find my shoes, my car was already swinging behind a tow truck like a captured animal. I stood there barefoot, heart pounding, knowing exactly who did it. Her name was Karen. If you love powerful stories where quiet people snap smart, you don't want to miss this. But before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. It honestly makes us happy to see how far our stories travel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let me tell you what Karen did. Karen was the HOA president, not elected, appointed by audacity. She treated our cul-de-sac like a personal kingdom where clipboards outranked compassion. She'd cited me for my mailbox being half an inch too tall, for a basketball hoop leaning like it was tired, for grass she claimed was emotionally unkempt. But towing my car at midnight, that was new. That was new. Cruel. I'd parked where I always parked, in front of my own house, after a double shift at the hospital. I was a respiratory therapist then, still smelling like antiseptic and grief, carrying the weight of other people's breaths on my shoulders. The HOA rule Karen worshipped said no overnight street parking, a rule written decades ago before two-car families and before my mother moved in after her stroke. The towing company said cash only, more money than I had. So I sat on the curb in the dark, phone shaking in my hands, and cried quietly, not to be heard, just to survive. Morning came anyway, it always does. And that's when Karen made her second mistake. Morning didn't care that I'd cried on the curb. It showed up bright, smug, and on time. I borrowed a neighbor's truck and went to work with my pride folded neatly in my pocket. Patients needed oxygen. Machines beeped. Lives went on. By the time I got home, exhaustion sat in my bones like wet sand. That's when I saw the paper taped to my door. Another violation. Unsightly items, it said, because my mother's walker was resting on the porch exactly where she needed it. That was the moment something inside me cooled. Not anger. Focus. Karen thought I'd explode, thought I'd beg, thought I'd move. Instead, I read. I read HOA bylaws like bedtime stories, county ordinances like love letters, zoning maps until the lines blurred. I learned something funny. Karen's power stopped at the curb. The street, public. The towing rule, invalidated years ago by the county. And then I learned something deliciously ironic. Karen's house, the immaculate corner palace with imported stone and hedges trimmed like they were afraid, had a secret. It sat right across an emergency easement. Not partially, not accidentally, illegally. A rushed permit, a conditional approval, a correction that was never made. Karen, queen of rules, had built her throne on a technical violation. I didn't rush. I gathered photos, maps, emails, public records requests so polite they could have worn pearls. I sent a calm letter to the HOA board, not to Karen, citing the law she'd ignored. That evening, Karen showed up at my door, tight-lipped and furious. She warned me I'd regret pushing. I looked past her at her perfect lawn and said softly, "So will you." And that's when the county noticed. The county doesn't move with anger. It moves with clipboards. Surveyors came first, quiet men with measured steps and long tapes that stretched like truth across Karen's lawn. Then inspectors. Then official notices stapled to stakes like warning flags in enemy territory. Karen fought loudly. Oh, she fought. She told anyone who would listen that I was jealous, vindictive, unstable. She called me a troublemaker who wanted to destroy the community. Funny thing about facts, though, they don't argue back. They just sit there, heavy and undeniable. The night before the final ruling, my car reappeared in my driveway. No apology, just a receipt slid under my door, fee waived, silent surrender. The next morning, cones lined the street. Yellow tape fluttered like cautionary ribbons. Heavy equipment idled, engines humming low, patient, inevitable. I stood on my porch with my mother, her hand warm in mine. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering. Karen was there too, hair undone, voice sharp, yelling into her phone like volume could rewrite zoning law. The county order was read aloud. The structure violated a protected emergency easement. Temporary fixes weren't allowed. The house had to be removed, not fined, not altered, removed. Walls came down piece by piece, stone cracked, dust rose. Karen's perfect fortress shrank into rubble under the same rules she'd weaponized for years. I didn't cheer. I just breathed. because this wasn't revenge, it was correction. If you're enjoying this story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It truly helps these stories reach more people. By the end of the month, the street looked different. Not emptier, lighter. Karen's house was gone, replaced by open sky and the faint outline of what had once loomed over all of us. The HOA changed too. Emergency meetings, new leadership, rules rewritten in plain language, the kind that understands real life happens between midnight and morning. Street parking became allowed. Towing was repealed. Grace stopped being a joke. Karen moved away. I heard she told people I ruined her life. Maybe that's easier than admitting she built it on a shortcut and called it authority. One evening, as the sun dipped low and kids filled the street with laughter, my neighbor leaned against the fence and said, "Most people would have just moved." I shook my head. "Most people are tired," I said. "That doesn't mean they're wrong." I planted a small tree at the edge of the easement where Karen's hedge once stood. It's thin, still learning how to be tall. But every time I water it, I remember that night, standing barefoot in the dark, watching my car disappear. Power forgets compassion easily. Ordinary people forget their worth even faster. But rules matter, and people matter more. And when the two collide, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just shows up with a clipboard and a backhoe. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with someone who's ever been pushed too far. And tell us where you're watching from. It truly makes us happy to see how far our stories travel.